Hello, namaste friends, welcome. This is Eric with the Divine Nobodies Podcast. Once again, I'm joined by the lovely Jennifer Lynn. How you doing, Jen?
I'm doing well.
We're all doing as best as we can during this Mercury retrograde.
Oh my God, it's been a hot one.
Yeah, we're going to keep pushing through. For everybody that's listening, you could also see the video version of the podcast. If you're more of a visual person, you can actually hop onto YouTube and see the video of this podcast in its entirety. So we have a really special guest in the studio with us today, Jen.
We do. So we have Sofia Araya. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ooh, all right. She's an international spiritual life coach, a spiritual teacher, and a spiritual interior designer, which I've actually never heard of. So excited to hear about that.
I've never heard of that either.
Yeah. So she was born and raised in Chile, but currently lives in Los Angeles with her now husband. And they moved here to pursue their dreams about 5 years ago. So most of our work revolves around Akashic Records and how to incorporate those in every area of practice. So she believes spirituality should be fun and doesn't need to be taken so seriously, which so do we. So
I love that end part. Shouldn't be taken so seriously.
yeah.
Because there's a lot of seriousness in this sort of field.
Oh, for sure.
You know?
People are so intense. Yeah.
Yeah, so intense. So Sophia, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Really excited to talk to you guys.
Yeah, we're really happy to have you here. There's a lot of ground to cover. You're a really complex woman. You do a lot of different things.
Yes.
She also has a podcast too, so which we can probably touch on that a little later in the show.
If you speak Spanish, because it's in Spanish.
Yeah, you have to learn how to speak Spanish in order to be able to get in on that. But how hard could it be, Jen?
It's pretty hard.
You know, we're in the age of technology. I mean, back when we were younger, you'd have to do like a hooked on phonics sort of thing. I don't think you can do that now.
I think it's harder to learn a language as you get older.
Really?
Yeah.
Because you're like set in your ways.
Yeah.
No,
I don't learn as quickly as I used to.
I feel like if there's like a spiritual underpinning to your seeking, because a lot of that whole practice is about subtraction and all about sort of like unlearning learned conditioned behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I feel like if you're going to venture into that realm, it might be a little easier for you to pick up Spanish.
Maybe.
What do you think?
That makes sense because I translate a book. I have this book club version in my podcast. So sometimes I translate these books because there's not a lot of spiritual books in Spanish.
Yeah.
So I translate this book and I've noticed that I do it while I'm reading it. So I've noticed that sometimes I kind of channel the words because I can't translate that fast when I'm in normal life, you know?
Wow.
Yeah. So
Oh,
I
that's
don't know.
cool.
There might be something to what you just said.
Yeah.
I hope so. So I wanted to start this off. I had gone on your Instagram. This is one of the ways that we had found you. And you talk about a lot of different things. You practice reading the Akashic Records, but this quote really actually stood out to me. And I want to read it off for everybody that's listening to kind of just give you an idea of the type of work that she's into and the type of life that she leads. So it says, "We are jumping timelines right now. We are leaving the old behind. This requires new levels of purging, breaking, shattering, opening. Let it happen."
I could feel it. I wrote it and I was like, oh. And I kind of remember that.
And what does that quote mean to you when you say that?
Yeah. So, you know, we're in such a wonderful and, you know, weird time that we're living in. And in the Akashic Records, I'm always shown different timelines for different things, different, even past lives with different timelines, like this multidimensional universe. Mm-hmm. And right now, what I think we're leading up to in 2021, hopefully, is choosing the timelines that we want to be in. But that means getting rid of the timelines that we need to just cut out of our life.
Right.
So I've been seeing that a lot. And actually I've been seeing, which is really interesting to me, is I've been seeing a lot, and especially this week, is timelines getting cut off from past lives that just end. Like,
wow.
Yeah, I'd never seen that before.
Yeah. And for people that are listening, can you kind of just define what you mean by timelines when you say
Yes. So it's the way I see it in the Akashic Records is the way I can basically define it because it's just like my understanding of it. But it's like parallel universes that you can kind of jump into one or the other, but you have to align yourself with that because we can co-create and align, and that's what we're here to learn. So we get to decide what timeline we're going. We get to decide what timeline we are on, but we have to work on the ones that we don't want.
Yeah.
So it's like reminiscent of the episode that we did prior to this one is about venturing in from the 3D into the 5D.
Yes.
Right? And we kind of made a distinction between kind of how we see it, how I saw it in traditional Eastern spirituality, which is like you're moving out of the ego and into awareness, right? So I see kind of like shifting timelines is kind of another way of doing that. It's like instead of narrowing down your vision to all of the physiological sort of functions of the body that keep you bound to different types of pleasures and very limiting type of things, we're opening up more to a vaster space, right? Like a vaster space of awareness that is obviously, I feel like, operating from that 5D.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't know about you guys, but I've felt that so much, like the change. I feel different every day, especially lately. It's just like, I don't know, there's a lot happening, and we're definitely going into 5D. Yeah. At least I am. I don't know how you guys are feeling, but I'm like, there's something weird going on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because there's like a collective, I mean, obviously we're all going through the quarantine together, and there are a lot of spiritual implications, especially for people that are practicing this type of work as healers. It seems like there's more imperative for people like you or I and Jen to show up for that type of work, because the energy is so intense. And we kind of look at it as like a collective dark night of the soul, where usually in this work prior to quarantine, it was us individually kind of moving through that. But now it's almost like nature and the universe banding together so that we could all collectively as humanity ascend forward. Yes. And that involves, I imagine, just getting rid of a lot of shadow stuff.
Yes, a lot.
And like moving through that, right?
Yeah, definitely. I've been doing that a lot with my clients. And even my country, Chile, is going through so much right now, this big awakening, and everybody's texting me like it's like destruction everywhere. And I'm like, oh, it's what's supposed to happen. Like, I feel like we get to have a broader perspective of everything that's going on most of the time. And it's really nice.
For sure.
It's like even that, how you say that this is supposed to happen, obviously that comes from sort of brightened more awareness, right? Yeah. Because you're looking at it from the eternal spirit, right? You're looking at it as, well, we can come here and do this a million times if we want to. And this is just part of the curriculum is how do we evolve? So we're not worried so much about physical death. We're worried more about how can we develop spiritually, like in this dimension, right? So how did you get into this work originally? Like as far as the Akashic Records?
Yeah, I want to hear about the first time.
Yeah.
The first time you got in and you're like, whoa.
It was amazing. It was weird because, so I'm an interior designer by trade, and I had an amazing job, and like it all started leading up to spirituality. So I started moving more into that, and that's a longer story, but I'd been doing energy healing and really doubting myself. I had learned all the tools and stuff, and I was using it, but I still was a little bit, I don't know if it, I had doubts, which we all do.
Yeah. Am I doing this right?
Sure.
Yeah. And it was like, like I was visited by spirits, and I was like, how am I going to tell this person that I'm just seeing like their grandmother or whoever? And I didn't fully trust it. And my teacher had told me that you can't access your Akashic records yourself, that you have to use what is called an Akashic Records keeper, which is kind of like a guide who comes from the Akashic Records and gives you information about, from your Akashic Records. And I thought that was just weird. Like I love my teacher, but I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. Like it didn't, something in me resonated, and it just kept showing up, how it happens to everybody. Like you start listening to Akashic Records all over the place, and that's how you get pulled into it. And then the first time I went in, it just felt like home. It was totally different from the 3 months that I had been doing like every week for intuitive healing, which were amazing. But this was just like even next level. And at that point, I had been communicating with the grandfather of a friend like 2 weeks before that. And I grabbed this book, and the book, I was like, he's showing me this book, and it said, Trust Your Intuition. And I could read the title. I could read it, not necessarily hear it. And that was weird for me, because I was like, why am I reading the message? And I noticed that they were trying to show me the message so I wouldn't doubt listening to it in my own, knowingness, or just like listening to it in my mind. And when I went in the records, the same thing happened. Like I started seeing the letters and the words just spread out inside in the air. Like they were showing me all these things, and it was much more visual than my normal experience.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And it was really cool. When I went in, they were like changing the channels of like a landscape and a window. And they were like, she likes the ocean, so let's put ocean. Like I could see them like setting the whole space up. Yeah. And I was like, wow, that's just home. And I felt bad because I was like having this really intense experience next to the rest of the group. But then we practiced with other people and then I didn't get anything. So I was like, oh no, maybe this isn't for me, you know? So it was a very interesting, amazing experience.
Had you had any experience prior to that with any type of mediumship or anything that would imply or give you the impression that you would be driven towards this work?
No, my aunt, who is in many ways, you know, she's very close to me. Yeah. She was told by this psychic the year before that her daughter was going to be in the Akashic Records. Like she had this connection to the Akashic Records, and her daughter's like so not into this. So I knew it was me, you know. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay, that's me. But I was like, that just sounds so weird. But then it really, you know, after that, it just started popping up everywhere, and I was like, I'll just sign up, you know, like I just felt it. Yeah. But I've never had an Akashic Records reading before.
Yeah. Wow. I love that you approached it in a very practical way, because I'm naturally a skeptical person when it comes to pretty much everything, especially when it has a tinge of woo in there, you know. But I once I went into that, and especially you noticed when we were talking earlier about like the doubts that you experience as a healer that give you this feeling of, okay, am I ready for this work? And I think of that, especially in my sound healing or even my Reiki practice, as being obviously the greatest catalyst for people like us, because it pushes us into these unknown realms and this like unknown territory. Yes. You know, so was there fear when you initially went into that? I mean, because I imagine you enter, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's is it something that is relative to how we would see maybe astral projection, where you leave your body?
Some people do have that experience, and I feel like I have it, but I'm not that aware of it, because I do feel like I go up to some place and that I'm seeing all these places and different landscapes and different guides. And it just doesn't feel like when I talk to my regular spirit guides that are closer to me down here on earth. So I do feel like you leave your body. And now that I'm working with a medium, and she's training me more in mediumship outside of the Akashic Records, because I also do mediumship inside the Akashic Records, I notice how my body always, whenever we start, it just goes up because it's used to that. Right. So it was happening, but I wasn't aware of that. But I've never been afraid of that. When I was little, I was afraid. And when I started knowing that, oh, nothing can really hurt you, you know, and getting into all that stuff, then I was fine.
Yeah. So when you enter into this field, and I'm going, my experience with the Akashic Records is through various types of meditation, but also the work of Edgar Cayce, who is the sleeping prophet. And we were talking before the podcast, he's probably one of the more prolific ones that kind of set the bar for our understanding of how that work goes, right? And he used to go into these really deep sort of hypnotic states, and he worked in a lot of, I would say like the medical field, and how he would diagnose like patients with different illnesses and give them a sort of like curriculum to follow when it came to like diet and stuff like that. So when you go there and you see these galleries, like these archives, do the words that you see, are they something that you could read almost like in English language, or does it come more of like a feeling that you get?
Yeah. So now it has changed. I think that first time they did that, so I would be sure that I wasn't making it up. It was like, okay, Sofia, like it's really time to stop doubting yourself. Yeah. But now sometimes I will see it kind of what you say. I will be reading something, but I will know the word or hear the word. And I know that there's a word and I hear it and then it appears, and something like that. It always changes because everybody's records are different. Yeah. So it's always so different. Yeah. But yeah, I do feel it. And I was hearing, I also channel light language.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So when I do that is, it's kind of like the same thing if you've done that, because you kind of hear these words that you don't know what you're talking about, but you kind of know what you're talking about. Sort of like you have the feeling of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I see, like, because I do light language in my sound baths, right? And I have an affinity more towards like Arcturus and Arcturian sort of starseed type of like lineage. Yeah. And I've had my experience contact with them through various types of plant medicine or like really, really deep hypnotic sort of samadhi type of meditations. And so I know what you mean when it comes to like how that message sort of like penetrates through your field, because I look at it almost like I would look at a mantra, right? At the very sort of practical level, mantras aren't really so much about what they mean. They're sort of like what they have, the feeling that you get from them. So when I'm getting that message kind of through me, and when I'm singing light language, it's in a, I mean, if you don't know what light language is, it sounds kind of out there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But there's just some beauty. There's something to it that obviously when people hear it, it sets them into this space that you can't necessarily articulate with words, but it creates a feeling.
It's amazing. The first time I heard light language was last New Year's Day, and I didn't even, I didn't channel light language back then. And I was like, what is this? Like, this is something else. Yeah.
Do you sing it or do you speak it?
I sing it. It started after that, of course, like, I feel like that was my activation. When I do energy healing, I kind of sing like a sound bowl. So it's like, and it's so weird.
It's like seed syllables.
It's still so weird for me. And then one day I just started feeling like I needed to talk. So I just started talking, and sometimes depending on different, clients I have, some of them are really weird. Like they're different languages.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Really interesting.
To say the least.
Yeah. And I imagine like when you're channeling it, did it evolve from, because when you channeled like the Akashic Records, so that sort of receptor in that channel is, I imagine, the same in terms of like what you drop into in order to channel light language.
Yeah.
So
the way I feel it is, I channel my spirit guides all the time too. So I channel like what I call regular spirit guides, and then they're the guides in their records who are a little bit out there, kind of like you would have to go to the records to talk to them most of the time. So when I channel light language, for me, what happens and how it started, now I do it in my sessions, but when I do it for me, I just get dizzy and I start feeling like this pull to, like it's happening, Yeah. I start getting really dizzy, and it's just like comes out. It's just like I open my mouth and it starts happening.
Yeah.
How cool.
I went on your Instagram, and you you channel, I imagine like interpersonal sort of like connections with other people, but you also have some channeling from Jesus.
Yeah.
Whoa.
She
I didn't know about this.
She channeled some Jesus type of energy in some of her writing on her Instagram. So, and I've read it, and it's really, really powerful stuff.
Wow.
Right. So when you go into these spaces, do you make the intention to kind of speak with these sort of ascended masters, and then that energy sort of flows through you?
No, they pick you?
Yeah, that day it was really weird because I was brought up Catholic, right? And then I was bullied a lot in the Catholic school that I was in. And I just like, all the shadow side of the Catholic, we could go on that forever. But I moved from that into a school that wasn't any specific religion. And then I forgot about it. That was 7th grade. And I just, felt so much better there, and kind of blamed Catholicism for the way people were in the other school. That was, me when I was little. Yeah. But then I never really came back. And the fact that, everybody was like, my fault. There's like this prayer that says, it's my fault. That would drive me crazy when I was little. I was like, it's not your fault. Like, why would it be your fault? So I was like really stirred away from that. But I always felt this connection to Mother Mary, but Jesus, not that much. So when we started, this was quarantine, like I think it was April, and I was feeling like April 14th and 19th, it was a really important date. I still don't know why, but I was getting like so much energy around that. And so one day I was in my records and I saw the statue of Jesus, and I was like, okay, like this is creepy, because it looked like an old statue in a church. And I saw like somebody just hitting it with a bat and destroying it. And I was like, oh no, like what is happening? Is somebody like a psychic attack or something? Yeah. But it didn't feel bad. So I was like, what is this? Okay. Like, I'll check it. And I see Jesus, and Jesus is there. He's the one destroying.
He's like beating it. Oh, I love
He's
that.
the one destroying So I was like, what is this? Like, I was like,
excuse me, what are you doing?
I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I don't want you to look for me in a church anymore. Like, I'm in your hearts. I'm Christ consciousness. I'm in your heart. I don't want you to be looking at other people and thinking that you need to worship me. I'm the same as you and me, and blah, blah, blah. Like all these, like this beautiful long message. And it came in English and then in Spanish, like it happened 2 times. So the messages are kind of different. But that was the main energy. And now a friend yesterday, it was so funny. She sent me this image of a church that they completely burned down in Chile in this riots that are going on now. It's like the whole country. And she's like, I don't care what side you are on, but this is just like so violent. Like you can't. And I was like looking at this, and there's part of me that I was like, yeah, it's horrible. But at the same time, like I was like, there's a reason like the church is burning down. And I could see like there's a Mother Mary figure, and there's like all these flames around it. And I'm like, I love Mother Mary. I see her all the time in my records. But when I was seeing her there, I'm like, well, whatever.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird to be so disconnected from reality sometimes, I gotta say.
Yeah, I love that you saw Jesus essentially with I imagine something like a baseball bat.
Yeah, it was a bat. That was it.
Yeah.
Right? So my experience with reading the Gnostic Gospels, right? If you ventured into the Gnostic Gospels, they're basically these books of the Bible that were taken out during the reign of Emperor Constantine during Rome.
Yeah. And
they took out really, really large, really important aspects of this Bible, including like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene.
That's the one I've heard about.
Right. Mm-hmm. And if you've read that, it tells a very different story of her role in Jesus's life. And we can even go as far as to say that they were partners at some point.
Yes.
Right. And she was one of his most favorite disciples. And he probably learned a lot from her as well, just as a person. They kind of seemed like they were on an even playing field. But they also have like the Gospel of Matthew. And the reason why I bring this up is because the energy of the Gnostic Gospels is kind of what you said when you saw Jesus in this monument. It's like the church of God is inside of your heart.
Yeah.
And I think human beings do this exceptional job at worshiping sort of idols and monuments, and they forget the real point of spirituality altogether.
Exactly.
Like when you were, what would you say is one of the main issues that you saw with the church growing up? Because I mean, I was raised a Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, wow.
And Jen was also a Catholic, I believe, right?
I was, well, my family's Catholic, but we weren't really raised in religion.
Yeah. I always love the conversion where it's like we start in this sort of like fundamental sort of Christian sphere. And then we start venturing into these more esoteric, more new age type of teachings that, put an entirely different definition to all of these things. So what are some things that you saw in the church that kind of caused you to kind of question it?
Yeah. Well, guilt for me is a big one.
Yeah.
Oh, the Catholic guilt, that shit is real.
Yeah. And then you just come with that. Like there's no like, oh, you're born with a sinner.
Yeah.
You don't even like have to do anything. It's just like, you're already a sinner, but didn't do anything, but you are. And it's just that for me was the main thing. Cause I feel like, I'm not a very, I've worked on this in my Akashic Records. I've been an authority in a lot of lives. So I've never had trouble with authority, but I know there's a big trouble with authority in the church. There's this priest that tells you what to do. Right. And then there's also like, they're all men, right? And nuns, like, even though there's a lot of nuns in Chile, I never had a nun, teach me anything, or I don't remember being around nuns at all. They would be in schools, but it's not the same. Like it's not the same. And that like inequality and not being able to like get married or just like all the rules. There's just so many rules.
There's a lot of rules.
It's like, you're not supposed to get a divorce if you don't like somebody. It's like, you're supposed to be miserable. Yeah. And we're here to be happy. Right. So it's like, that just, it doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of rules that don't make sense in religion.
I always think one thing
every religion, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that I always found interesting about religion is that I experience God as like this infinite, eternal, like energy that is always constantly creating, always constantly evolving. So when you see something like a sort of dogmatic sort of principles of like the Christian church or the Catholic church, where it's very stagnant, it doesn't ever move. There's no sense of progression.
Yes.
Right. And so if you experience God as this omnipotent sort of like energy that is constantly, basically a creative type of force, constantly moving forward. I mean, we embody his energy because we're always constantly creating. We're always changing and growing, and everything in nature for the most part does the same thing. But for whatever reason, the church stays exactly the same. And it sort of like it works in complete contradiction to how I imagine God to work. So that's how I feel it's ran more by, people that have a more dogmatic way of looking at it.
And egos, everybody's egos.
Yeah.
And just like, this, you see this in Chile a lot. There's like a lot of these old ladies and they're like, I can't miss church. Like my grandmother, she thought that if she missed church and then she passed away that week, that she would go to hell.
Oh,
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
Like she was like, I have to go because what if I die this week? And I
Right.
was like, this is a woman who's around me. And I tell her, and she's like, well, I believe you because I trust you and I know you wouldn't be lying. But like all these kind of like weird, rules that don't make sense. Nobody questions them.
Right.
And like, she's, all these women of her age, like, and I love my grandmother. But she goes to church and she's like, we have to be open and everything. But then she comes home and she's like, you look at these, like, she's like so mad at the world and she doesn't understand different points of views that are not her point of view in politics and all these things. She's like talking so bad about people. So I'm like, what did you just do for an hour in there?
Right.
Like talking about unconditional love.
Yeah.
Right.
And that happens a lot. And,
It does.
it's my grandmother, but it's like all the old ladies.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I want to read this quote. This is another quote by Sofia that was really compelling for me. It's called Rebirth. And it says, something has to die in order to be reborn. When a baby comes into the world, their safe space begins to crumble. It gets darker. It is scary. It's chaotic. There's only uncertainty. When the baby gets to the other side, it arrives to unconditional love. It can finally breathe. Let's co-create this space together, united.
I'm like, I channel those. So when I hear them, I'm like, oh, that's
You're like,
nice.
oh, I wrote that. That's good.
Yeah, I'm like, what did that mean?
Yeah.
No, but like, what really resonates from that quote to me is the uncertainty part, right? Because we're living in such an uncertain time and everybody wants answers.
Yeah.
Like even my mom, she's like, when do you think this will be over? Like since like it started. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I connect, but I don't have like the answers of the universe. There's so many timelines. There's so many possibilities. She's like,
who's going to win the election?
Yeah. The uncertainty, like people can't live. And I understand it,
Yeah.
Especially in quarantine, which we can't really do much, right? We're like, should I move? Well, now it's like weird. Like when, and then should I change a job? Well, then now there's like not many jobs. So it's like a very weird time to live in. And everybody's like in this uncertainty energy. That's how I feel. So we have to just embrace that. That's what I've been doing.
Yeah.
We don't really have a choice.
Right. We don't have a choice.
Right.
That's exactly right.
And then after that, I'm sure like the unconditional love has come. And since I wrote that quote, I mean, I feel like I've been born again 400 times this year.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know if you guys feel the same. I don't know if it's something that I do a lot of spiritual work but I know a lot of people have been going through that. Just like rebirth.
Oh, yeah.
I love that. And what comes up for me when in this quote is how, and I'm doing just a comparison between just standard Christianity and this sort of new age way of thinking is their whole idea is this sort of like literal interpretation of dying and being born again, as if somehow it just happens one time in your life. And the same thing when it comes to Jesus. I personally don't believe that Jesus actually died on the cross. I think that he was very much alive and fled off to India and lived and died in Kashmir and probably had an entire family. And that'd be an entirely different episode. But in this type of...
Oh, you're a bad Catholic.
In this... Oh my God. I'm not worthy, Jen. I'm not worthy. And in this new sort of way of shifting and expanding my awareness and consciousness, from my experience, those deaths and those rebirths happen continuously throughout my life.
Yes.
You know what I mean? We would, I guess, call that like a dark night of the soul, where it's like there are always going to be pieces that we want to let go of in order to sort of grow into the person that we want to be. And that's just sort of like this ever expanding process. And there's not really a whole lot of guilt involved with that because that's just the way that we learn.
Exactly.
That's what I don't understand about the church. It's like you learn through really difficult experiences, and they would call it sinning, but I see it as like, man, I've learned some of the greatest lessons from hitting the absolute bottom or being a complete asshole in situations.
Yeah. Making the biggest mistakes.
Making the biggest mistakes.
Are also your greatest learning, right?
Yeah, and learning from those.
And the other thing that I think is like, I'm really triggered by the absolute truth of it all. It's like, there's only one life and then you die and then and I'm like, well, how can you know? Like, how can you be so sure of what you're teaching? Like, yeah, maybe there's a lot of lives. Maybe there's not. Like, I've experienced a lot of past lives in the records, of course, like with everybody all the time. But at the same time, it's like the church, they just say like, no, this is the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is the way.
This is the only way.
This is the way. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, how do you know that? How can you be so like, arrogant to think that your way is the only way? I would never say that. I always say like, there's no, if you have another experience when I teach, because I also teach the Akashic Records. Mm-hmm. And when I teach them, I'm like, well, you just go with your experience. If your experience is different from what I'm teaching you, you're in your records. Like that's your reality. That's your creation of reality. Yeah. Never take anything that I say as an absolute truth.
Right.
Yeah. And the church does that so much.
You're like, I'm just here to guide you.
That really triggers me. That's something that still gets me.
It's like this idea that there's no other way of looking at it. You know, the beautiful thing about this sort of practice and my expansion and awareness is that I don't discredit Jesus's work. It actually has more meaning now than it did before.
100%.
And the way that he lives, the one thing that his life sort of embodied for me is that it makes it more relatable, because I realize now that he's actually just a regular human being like we were, so venturing off of that though, I was actually curious about your work with guides. So do you feel other people's guides when you're around them?
Yes. I mean, I'm not like all the time. Sometimes people are like, are you seeing like my dead grandmother right now? And so I'm like, no, I would have to like sit down and tune in.
Yeah.
But the first session I do is like a distance energy healing and a message from your guides. That's what I usually start with people, with just knowing their name. And that's always so fun, because then I call upon a guide of them there. I don't know how you say that. I call their guides. Yeah. And then sometimes I just have those.
You got to get those pronouns right.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, like they're guides, so whatever. But so, guides come forward and I never know what guide is going to come. And like, for example, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had one guide. It's usually, kind of male or female or kind of alien. That's like, but the other day there was a fairy. So I was like, I don't know these people. Like, I'm like, well, your guide is a fairy. Like, one thing is to have a guide, but then people, I don't know how out there people are, because I've never met them.
Yeah.
So I was like, your guide's a fairy. And then the fairy's like, I'm going to talk in fairy language now. And I was like, oh no, like I'm channeling it. Yeah. I'm like, I have to talk in fairy language. And my voice was like, yes, I'm the fairy, like kind of like all that. So I'm like, this person, I don't know. Like you have to really, really go for it.
Yeah.
And then she's like, and now, so I just started laughing then, because she's like, now I'm going to sing the fairy song. And I was like, oh no, I have to sing?
Should have sprinkled some fairy dust on her.
Yeah, I know. I was like, are you kidding me? And this is all at a distance. So I'm not with the person. I send them the recording later, and they're not on the phone or anything. I just record it for an hour. So then I talked to everybody's spirit guides, and that was a very interesting experience I had. And the woman was actually very receptive to that. She was like, that's beautiful. I felt so much energy with the song. And I was like, thank God, because I didn't even know what the song meant. And then I'm singing, and I'm not a singer.
That is so cool.
Yeah, I love what you that's the first time I've actually heard of a guide being something more of like a fantasy type of character, like a fairy. And I love that, because when I read certain books, they talk about, I mean, especially Mount Shasta. We had an episode about Mount Shasta, and they talk a lot about these sort of 4th, 5th dimensional entities that live. Even Sasquatch lives in this place.
Yeah.
And people, once they're tapped into those fields, they can see things like lawn gnomes, like gnomes.
I now
like
believe in anything, like
and troll, like all those different things. They have to have come from somewhere,
right?
Right. And it makes me wonder if, like, maybe back then that's exactly what they were seeing, something relative to kind of what you're saying, fairies and things like that.
Yes.
So it puts a different spin. You seen gnomes?
I've seen gnomes twice, like in spirit, like not actually seen it, but and they both the times they've been pretty mischievous. Yeah. So I'm like, I don't know about the gnomes, but yeah, I'm open to anything. I'm really open to anything at this point. I can't say, I remember the first time my friend, I was like, well, I talk to spirits. She's like, oh, my sister sees fairies. And I thought, your sister's crazy. Because like spirits are normal, but fairies
I don't know about that.
Yeah. Who knows what's really true.
So what is the weirdest thing that you've seen in the records?
In the records. Okay. So in the records. So something that I think is very interesting about the records is just like, it's a representation of your soul. So everybody's souls like different things. And there's this one lady that I did her Akashic reading, and everything was like the Devil Wears Prada. It was like a fashion,
wow.
office. And you could see all the guides like walking through one side to the other, like taking clothes and stuff. And then like one guy greets you, but it's like kind of like the fantasy of her soul, like what her soul likes in this lifetime.
Wow.
So it's always like, I always think that's like, maybe it's not that out there, but it's really, it was really interesting for me to see because you don't expect that in Akashic Records. You know, everybody's like the library and it's all serious. And for me, it's always like just a trip.
Yeah. It makes you realize that God also has a sense of humor, right?
For sure.
And it's kind of like how we started the podcast where it's like there's a seriousness to spirituality where it's like people have a strict definition of what they imagine sacredness to be.
Yeah.
But I don't think that means losing your humanness. I think it just means balancing and kind of like living in the flow and enjoying life without getting too involved in, too identified with certain things, right? Mm-hmm. So I love that there's this sort of feeling of that sort of whimsical sort of playfulness too, because that's how I see Source as very playful. He'll show up however you want him to, you know? So that's super cool.
And joy is such a big thing. And sometimes when I channel, I start laughing before, because I hear the guides saying something funny and they make me laugh like, oh, I'm going to sing a fairy song before I even get to say it. So I start laughing. And once I had two of my best friends separate, you know, they were like, hey, like, I don't know if you want any feedback, but like in your channeling that you posted on Instagram, it looks like you're fake. And I was like, why does it look like I'm fake? She's like, because you laugh in between. Like, and I don't notice because I'm like flowing. And I was like, you know what? Like, that's just what I do. If I block my laughter, then I'll block the information too. Right. You need to let it flow. Everything.
Right.
I love that. So
that is so cool.
There's a lot of curiosity with a lot of people, especially now. I feel like people are more open to these type of practices. What are some ways that people can do this themselves? You know? And we've read it in books, and I imagine it's different for everybody, but what are just some practical ways you imagine people can tap into that?
So the book, How to Read Your Akashic Records by Linda Howe. I don't know if you've heard about it. That's like what most people teach nowadays. But I got a new, that has a prayer and it has like basic information of what you can find in your records. And it's pretty well written. I think that's a pretty good book to start. Mm-hmm. And then I channeled a new prayer because that prayer she channeled was before 9/11. Mm-hmm. And this year I was like, I'm being called to teach. And I've been doing this for like, the first time I went in was, I would say January 2019. So it wasn't that long ago. So I was like, am I ready to teach? And my guys were like, yes, we'll give you all the information. I was like, okay. But then I was like going to teach in Chile, and then all this happened because I was going to go back there. But anyway, but I got my own prayer. And they told me that this prayer goes, it goes way, it reaches a new dimension of consciousness, way higher than the other prayer. And now I know that everybody's going to get at some point their own prayer. So my second level that I'm going to be teaching is on people how to get their own prayer to access the Akashic Records. But it's all with intention. And that's actually the first thing I teach. It's like, with intention, anybody can access their Akashic Records, but you just have to have the clear intention and not doubts or anything. The way I teach some people sometimes is just to take an elevator, just like visualize an elevator. You go in and you just press the Akashic Records floor, and then you go in and it opens up in the Akashic Record. And that usually works. If I'm guiding, because I'm already like I don't want to say it's going to work for everybody, but it might work for you. So try it.
I love that. The intention is definitely there. Sometimes because we're also visual creatures, we have to do a practice like that, visualizing in order to for that to inspire a more intrinsic feeling to come out. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I'm curious though, you mentioned at the beginning about having a prayer and needing sort of the protection of a guide. What is the reason for that? Is there a certain danger that people experience, moving from this life into these much higher realms that would require protection like that?
I don't remember when I said the protection part. What did I say?
You didn't use the word protection. Maybe it was more of like you needed a guide, somebody to assist you while you were there.
That was the other teacher that told her that you needed somebody like a guide, like a librarian,
would come back down and give you the information.
Exactly,
right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's another way of accessing your Akashic Records. If you usually work with spirit guides, you can ask for an Akashic Records keeper to come from the records.
Oh, I see.
But the good thing about the records is just a very it's like going to heaven in a way. Yeah. It just feels like that. It's just very light and love, and it's like all there is light and love. And any shadow you work on, it's transmuted in the love. So it's a really good place to actually do shadow work or work with lower vibrations, because it's a very high vibrational space.
Oh,
so you're
perfect.
always very protected.
Yeah. I love that, because I think the reason why I bring it up is because things that I've read, everybody experiences it very different, but in some things that I've read, they kind of made it seem like you needed to either have a guide with you to protect you along this journey to this place. So,
I think that's when you're astral traveling, because, you know, in the astral field, you can get like, there's so many things out there.
right.
And that's what I think, like the prayer, which mine is called the passcode. They always tell me like, don't say prayers, because prayer has a
Right.
lot of like, you know, it's a very charged word.
Yeah. And that's been my experience through getting into that field, is through astral projection. So I can see where it would make sense with that. I just wasn't sure if it was different if you were to just sit in your sort of meditation and go directly there in like a waking state sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, if you're doing it that way, I would definitely recommend getting a guide to guide you, because you can end up anywhere in the astral world.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. So
That's true.
whenever you're accessing the records and you're getting off on the Akashic floor on your elevator, what does it feel like? Do you get dizzy? Do you get lightheaded? Are there certain feelings that are associated with your entrance?
Yes. So sometimes I do prepare people, and it has something to do with what you said about light language. When I'm activating the Akashic Records in the course, what I do is I bring down energy. I guide the energy to come down from the Akashic Records, enter your body, and you start feeling it vibrating. And usually you get like a headache, or, you know, a little pressure on top of your head or something like that. That happens to almost everybody, because the energy enters your crown chakra. And it's really strong. It's not like an energy you've usually felt before. You can really feel a lot of energy. So that's the first thing. And then sometimes I will see a lot. Sometimes I won't see anything, and I would just listen a voice. The important thing is, like, if you're doing it, I would say we have so many expectations.
Yeah.
It's like, if you hear this podcast and then you try to go in your records and you're like, oh, but Sofia said she was reading words and I can't see words.
Yeah.
So like we all get into that space, and I would say that's like the one thing I will say, just try to see what happens for you.
Yeah.
I love those.
And you see actual pictures. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. So you see actual, you said it's different every time. You'll see, are they like pictures in your mind, or are they visual? Are you just like seeing them suspended?
Yeah, they're pictures in my mind and kind of suspended. But like yesterday I don't remember. I was in my records and I could feel my feet moving through a path. Like I can sometimes feel those kind of things too. Okay. And I'm usually my clairaudience, I think it's called. It's it's like my main thing for me, I've found. But in the records I do see, and I try to see, because people like to, you know, whenever the grandmother, they're like, oh, what's my grandmother? How does she look like? And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, oh, the hair, like trying to, okay, show me the hair, you know, because it's hard for me. It's not the one that comes most naturally, but I do see. It always changes on it.
So do you hear your own voice, or do you hear the voice of others?
It's kind of like my own voice, like in my head. But sometimes I channel and my voice definitely changes. I'm training to do trance mediumship in this safe way, because it happens to me sometimes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So,
and that's something that we hear also too. And I think we talked about it a little bit in one of our last podcasts, where how that information comes through a psychic or a medium. And a lot of the time, it's coming through your own sort of, your own field. So it could sound like your voice. It could sound like something that you're creating yourself. So a part of that work is trying to differentiate between what is yours and what isn't.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the main thing. Like I just did a podcast in Spanish for this same thing, imagination. Everybody's so scared of imagination. Like, what if I'm imagining? And I'm like, well, so what? Like, you just need it to flow, you know, because we hear it the same way. So people have this idea that they're going to hear it like in another voice, or like if somebody was actually there. And no, that's not, but we're not taught to receive that way. So it feels really, really weird.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. And one thing that we also was interested in was you, in the more practical sense, in the more grounded way, you've worked in your spiritual journey into some of your work, spiritual interior design.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
so
cool.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is? I mean, what comes up for me is something like a feng shui type of vibe.
Yeah. So everybody thinks it's feng shui, but it's not actually feng shui.
Yeah.
Because I grew up and my mom was very into feng shui, and it drove me crazy. And because I would see her doing it from fear. not from love. So I do think like the elements, and there's a lot that plays into that. It's very true. But most people who do feng shui, or like the clients that ask for feng shui, they're doing it because I need to get more money in my life. So I'm going to paint a wall green, but I hate the color green, but I'm just going to paint it green anyway, because, you know, it says that it's all the rules. And it feels for me kind of like that same like absolute truth from the church. Yeah. It's like the feng shui thing, you know, it's like, oh, and it's also out of fear. It's like, you can't sleep next to me, or you can't do this. And I'm like, you know, energy is always so different. Yeah. So what I do is I open the Akashic Records of the homes, and I read the energy of the home, of what the home actually needs and what you actually need, not what a book says on, you know, your life and your land, all these different things.
Yeah. You have in your Instagram, and I did my research.
I love that. I'm like, oh, somebody reads it. Yes.
So
you're like, whoa.
You have a 3-step process for this.
Yes.
Can you talk more about what that is? I know what it is.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about the 3 steps that you have.
Yeah. So the first thing I do is I go to the home and I open the Akashic Records, and we will sit in the middle of the home. And, you know, it's not very shamanic, which I think is also something people think I'm going to like, we'll go with bells and like a lot of sage. And I do that, but that's like a very small part of it. What I do mostly is I sit down, open the Akashic Records of the home, and tour it like in my mind, like psychically, even though I'm there, I don't move at first. And it's always so interesting. I love doing it because we start in the front door, and I will always see like, you know, the energy of that. They will give me special crystals for the front door, or maybe like a kind of flower, maybe this and that. It's always very different. And what I love about the front door is that they will always like clear the energy of whoever comes in. So they will put up like a kind of screen, and the screen is always like so different in shape and form and colors. And then I will go through the home, and sometimes I'll pick up on little things. So there was once I was doing this for a couple, and I was like in the bathroom, and I'm like, there's energy. Like, do you guys fight over the bathroom? They're like, yes, all the time. You know? So it's like that kind of thing. It's like, you don't get that in normal design when you just go like, cause I used to work in Chile. I used to work in interior design and in architecture. So I worked a lot in interior design, though, you know, I'm 31, so not a lot, but like 7 years. And I love it. I still love it so much. But it just like, it has so much more that goes into it than just like making it pretty, you know, which is really nice. But there's always like, you know, I would start noticing that the clients didn't just need a new sofa. They were asking for a new sofa because they were mad at their husbands and they wanted to spend money. Like, you know, the weirdest things, like, or divorce. Like, I got really passionate at some point helping like divorced women redecorate their homes because they're like, oh, finally I can do whatever I want now. Right. And they just get so excited, and it's like a rebirth for them. So we do that. The first step is Akashic. Then we declutter, which also is really important because there's a lot of energy in your things. You know, clutter is like energy. So I don't think I have to explain that. Everybody who's ever cleaned their home and decluttered or watched Marie Kondo knows that it's good.
And that clutter takes up space in your own mind too.
It does.
You know, it's like, you know subconsciously where everything in your home is. And I know that for me, whenever there's like either dishes or where I know there's a certain place in my home that needs work, it stays in that space. And it becomes like this option that deters me away from being fully present with what I'm doing. But once I go through it and I do it, I feel so much more open and clear afterwards.
And I do this meditation, which is kind of like really, you know, it's very stressful because the way I do it is like I have you sit down and just start expanding your aura, noticing the clutter that is around you. So like, even imagine like expanding your aura in your room, in your bedroom. If I were to do that right now, even though I teach this, like I have a pretty good amount of clothes on a chair, you know? So I could just think about that. It's just giving me like, like anxiety, and you start feeling the energy. So when I do that with clients, they will like, just, you know, get up and go. They're like, oh, right. Like they can feel the energy. You never tune into your things energetically. You don't really do it. But they all hold energy. Well, and vintage, don't even get me started about that.
Vintage.
I'm like always cutting cords with the people who owned those things first.
So
there's so much energy. And once you read energy, and I used to go into so many homes when I was working in interior design and wanting to say all these things and I couldn't, you know. So then I was like, I'm just going to do spiritual interior design. And now it's more of like spiritual clearing. Like we do space clearings, and then I do just a little styling. And but, you know, it's mostly about the decluttering part. It every day is a little bit less about the interior design, I have to say, because there's a lot of work that goes into that. It takes a lot of time, and I've been teaching a lot. So, but I love it. I love interior design. It's just so fun.
So the third step, elevate, is what you're saying. You're just like bringing in a different type of energy into that space. It makes sense because, I mean, whenever I get things secondhand or something that we would consider vintage, I always think of like the energetic component to that. Like we don't know where these objects have been. Yeah. And I approach it in the same way that we would with like tarot cards or crystals. It is so important to clear the energy. I mean, I imagine if people don't, then you have, haunted house situations.
Oh yeah. No, I know. So when we moved into this house, the previous owners hadn't lived here for 2 years, but they left all their stuff.
Oh, wow.
So when we moved in, the house was furnished. So we had to move them out before we could even move our stuff in. But they had a couple things that I thought were cool. So I kept them. That was dumb. And there's a big, like hand carved mirror, and it had doors over the front of it that would close to cover the mirror. And it was over the bed before, and it was huge and really heavy. And it was reflecting the bathroom. So when we started having all this like spiritual activity here, I called a home healer to help. And she said, there's a mirror that is a portal. And she was like, do you know what mirror I'm talking about? I was like, yes. She said, it's reflecting a bathroom. And I was like, it's not anymore, but it used to. I was like, I moved it downstairs into our living room. And that's where like the majority of the spiritual activity is happening.
Yeah.
And she was like, she was like, get some holy water and wash that mirror down and give it away.
Yeah. I was going to say, no, get rid of it. Like I've had mirrors are the most common portals I see, and also closets.
Closets. Yes.
Closets and mirrors are portals. They really are most of the times. And most of the times with mirrors, I have to get rid of them.
Yeah.
Like they won't clear.
They won't clear. Yeah. Yeah. That's what she said. She said, just get rid of it.
Do you have any more stuff from that older space here?
No, I got rid of everything.
So Jen, we gets a lot of spiritual activity here in this home.
Yeah.
I heard a little bit about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the podcast.
Yeah. And part of it is the location, right? Because we're, this neighborhood is called Freeway Triangle. So we are in the middle of 3 freeways that intersect. So with that intersection and the activity of the freeway and accidents and, that energy surrounding that,
and the fact that you're a medium, that also plays a huge part.
Yeah.
Whenever I space clear, I do a space clearing, I tell the people like, hey, are you open to me reading you? Because everything in your home is related to you. And people are like, oh, you're doing a home. And I'm like, well, who's fighting about this and that and this, because the energy is in the wall sometimes,
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah.
They're like, oh,
I've seen some scary stuff in homes.
Like, have you? Oh, tell us about it.
Yeah. I mean,
what's the first one that comes to mind?
What scares me the most. Like when there's for little kids, like dead little kids. Yeah. Like in the movies.
As long as they're not laughing in the middle of the night.
And then I'm like, you know what? I'm so happy that I don't see, that I'm not clairvoyant. Because I would see the other day I cleared home and I was like, I'm going to open the closet. And I was like, the realtor's kind of intuitive. So she asked me, and I was going to open the closet and I was like singing light language before I opened it. Thank God I was alone, because she's like, oh, here's the lockbox code. Because I was like, going at it. Yeah. So I was like, I'm just going to clear it, because I was recording it, and then I'll get back to you. And while I put pause, I was like singing light language because I was so scared to open this closet. I felt like in a scary movie, and I opened it, and of course, like I didn't know what I was going to find, but I felt the energy of like a small, like 6-year-old boy, but like dead. It was not good. But I love doing that because you can always clear it. It's not, and they're not bad. They're just like there,
lost,
stagnant.
Yeah.
And, there's always like difference. Yeah. Sometimes they're pretty. I had this little girl that was like really messing with a little girl that lived in a home. She was telling her to like climb over a tree or like weird things like that.
Yeah.
So that one was it was interesting. I had to like really, really help her cross over, and it took me like 30 minutes. She kept coming back.
Yeah. You mentioned that it could be because of a medium, and it doesn't mean just this home. Those spirits or different type of activity, I've been following Jen around for a long time.
Oh,
Texas, I think even when she was a child, right?
Yeah. But my house in Texas was, this house was very active, but my house in Texas was 10 times worse. And I lived there by myself. And I was kind of, I was in my 20s, so I was still really wild and like drinking a lot and partying and, you know, just doing shit that you do in your 20s. And I would get roommates because I lived in this 4-bedroom house by myself. So my roommates wouldn't last longer than 3 months because of the things that would happen in the house. I mean, chandeliers swinging, doors opening, you know, you could hear people talking in the other room, like clear, like we're talking, just things like that. And if you're not, I've kind of like lived around this my whole life, so it didn't bother me as much, but it really bothered my roommates.
I bet.
Yeah. Yeah. And then in this house specifically, there was some trauma in that house. The people that owned the house before I bought it, and I didn't know this, the neighbors told me that it was a younger couple, and she died of cancer, and she was only like 34, and they had a young kid, and he ended up hooking up with their kid's teacher.
No.
And they moved one street away and just left this house like empty. And it was empty for 5 years. So the last 2 houses that I bought were houses that sat empty for a long time.
You know what? That's very interesting because I grew up in a haunted house too, and that was like really intense. It's a long story, but it was empty for a while, and then this house where I did the reading with the little girl, that she couldn't even sleep in her room. And after I cleared it, the living little girl, she could go back to her room, but then they were supposed to move, and an offer came through, but they had packed all their things, and things started happening again. And I learned with that sometimes the energy of the home will kind of open up if you're leaving.
Really?
Because I had set it up and like protected it, and they were fine. But when they were gonna leave, they kind of like, there was something that told, oh, okay, it's good. And sometimes when homes are empty, you'll see like spirits from the neighborhood come into the home. Yeah. Kind of like it was an empty home. It's the same thing.
Yeah, squatters.
It doesn't have, like spiritual squatters.
Yeah, spiritual squatters. A lot. Yeah.
I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, no. And and I told my husband this too. Whenever we bought this house, I was like, oh, this house is sat empty. I was like, I don't know about this. My last house that sat empty was a nightmare. Yeah. And it was the same thing. Actually, the woman that cleared our home, she's in LA as well. And her name's Heather McCall. I don't know if you know her. Probably not, but just in case you do. And she said that. She said, oh my God, she said there was one main one. And she was like, as soon as I got rid of him, it's like there was like 40 spirits hiding behind him. She was like, this place was like a spiritual highway. I mean, people were just cruising through. Yeah. It's like, well, yeah.
So speaking, but it's better. Yeah. So speaking of that, we have something actually really special Sofia had agreed to prior to the podcast, which is she's going to do a live channeling.
I'm so pumped on this.
Of the Akashic Records. So if those spirits are here in this room right now, everybody gather together. Everybody gather around. This is going to be a really, really pivotal moment because one, I feel like the people that are listening, it'll be something that they definitely need to hear, especially during this time. As far as I understand from the astrological point of view, this week as well as last week, super intense for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. And the rest of the year. I'm like, I feel like every week I'm like, well, this week's really intense, guys. It's like, 2020. Yeah.
Exactly. So let's buckle up. We're going to go into this space. I don't know how long you want to do it, but you can take as much time as you'd like.
I might lose track of time, so you guys can stop me whenever I'm like,
okay. Yeah. We're just going to let you go.
Yeah. I'll just see whatever. We'll open up the records of the podcast. We can do that. So we can open up the records of the listeners of the podcast.
Okay.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all yours.
Ooh, cool. Okay. So what I'll say is like, I'll say half of the prayer, and then I start just saying it in my mind because I drift off. It's funny because I channeled it, but I don't really memorize it in my usual mind. And I'll be here. I'm conscious, but I'll be explaining what I'm seeing and who's talking and who comes up. I'm already seeing a lot of like light being energy. So, we've been talking a little bit about the light language. I don't think I'm not going to do light language unless they make me. It could happen.
Hey, you're welcome to.
They start talking.
I might start singing with you.
Yeah. Could you imagine? But I'm seeing a lot of light beings around already, kind of like they're gathering. So what is the, could you say it in your words? How do you say divine, like the name of the podcast, Divine Nobodies? How do you say it?
Yeah, it is Divine Nobodies.
Divine Nobodies.
Divine Nobodies. I love it. Like he's like Divine Nobodies. You have like such a radio voice.
He does.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so it is now that I become a vessel of Akashic energy of the highest vibration. I wish to view the listeners of the Divine Nobodies Podcast from the Akashic Records. And I ask that all beings communicate from love and light. I wish to honor the soul of the Akashic Records. Okay, amen. So it is. Okay. So I went up, instead of an elevator, kind of like a spaceship. So clearly the light beings are there, and the way I see it is like they're energetic light ships. They're not really like the ones that you would see, in movies. It's more of like little light ships. There's a lot of different ones. And you guys both have one. In the records, you both have one kind of ship. Yes. Oh, and Jesus is here. How convenient. Yeah. So he's like, you heard you were talking about me. He's so funny with me, it's going to sound, I hope this doesn't sound disrespectful to anybody. Okay. So he's taking me in between the two ships. One is yours and one is yours. And we're walking in between. He's kind of like parting, moving. I don't know how we did with the water and stuff. Like he's moving, opening up the way. It's really interesting. He's walking up. So what we're doing now is we're kind of like accessing the records. I always follow a guide when I get some point. Okay. He has like a big piece of paper. It's a very hippie Jesus. That's why I'm laughing, because he looks very cosmic, and he's almost like wearing tie-dye. It's like very, very hippie. Because he's here to talk about peace. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay. So, okay, yeah. So I'm going to channel his message about peace in my own voice. Don't worry. Okay. Okay, he's showing me first, before we go into the message, he's showing me that you two have had a lot of past lives together. Probably been told that before. But you've always kind of like, he's showing me two stairs, kind of like you get to step on each other. Like, oh, you help me, I help you. You help me, I help you. You help me, I help you. And you've been doing this for a long time. This is why you feel that connection. And this is why you feel like there's like this connection from your heart to heart. Like he's showing me that too. So this place, even though it's for the listeners of the podcast, it very much is for you too, because you're both growing from this, and you're both leaning on each other and learning from each other. And he's laughing because he's like, they don't even know it. They don't even know it, because it's like you do realize it, but not at the level that it's actually happening. He's laughing. He's laughing so hard. I don't know why. He just think it's so funny because every single word, every time both of you interact, you're activating these light frequencies, and he's showing me how that is traveling into all of the people that listen. Yeah. And he's kind of stoned. I feel like he's like stoned Jesus, I swear. It's like so funny. He keeps laughing and he's like, oh, like, like we're having fun. Yeah. So, okay. So he's like, okay, come on guys, sit around, gather around, just like, chill, have fun. Okay. He's saying that what he really appreciates from your podcast is the lightheartedness. I don't know how you say that word. That is lighthearted. And because of the times we're living in, everything is very, serious, like the news, like everything. You meet a friend and your friend comes with a serious face and everything's so serious. Like, oh, be careful. Don't worry. Like, what is going on? Did you see this? Did you see that? Even people who don't see the news, he's saying they're all so involved in it. You can't kind of get away from what is going on in the world like you would usually be able to shut off. And things like this, where you get to listen, where you get to really expand your soul and just be in that container of light. You guys are both creating this container of light for people. This is not just a podcast or a recording. It's a container of light that they get to find solace in. I think that's the word. Yeah. Okay. So I'm like, okay, should we channel now? He's like, okay. He's like, so chill. I'm like worried about the time, but he's like, who cares? Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, like, who cares? Okay, so let me just read what he has here. So I'm seeing, like, just so you know how I receive information, because I know a lot of people want to know that. I see Jesus, and he has this like multicolor robe, kind of like a rainbow robe. It's very psychedelic, I gotta say. And he has this this big paper. Okay. Dear listeners, what I would like you personally to know is that you're never alone and that you do not need to fear. Fear is being fed everywhere to you right now. And it is okay to be a little afraid, to be respectful, to be compassionate, but do not confuse those things with fear. Do not get in the way of your own happiness in thinking that there's too much responsibility on your shoulders. You're all being told, this is your fault, this is your fault, this is what you've been through. The world is here because of what you've done. And in a way, yes, it's true, but it's a collective of energy. And a lot of you feel like the whole world is on your shoulders, and that it's almost like hard to breathe because there's so many things that you need to fix. A lot of you feel that way because you're empaths and you're feeling everything around you. But I'm here. We are here in the records to let you know that it's not all on your shoulders. There's a lot of shoulders in the world, and there's also a lot of light beings right now. Lots of light beings. So almost like for every human being, there's 5 light beings around the globe. So we would just want you to imagine that. Imagine how many ships, how many light beings are hovering over Earth, covering the whole surface of Earth. They're all here to help you with this. But we can't help you unless you are open and willing and say, hey, help me. And you don't have to say exactly help me, but you can set the intention to receive energy. Just receive the vibrations. And I'm here because you talked about me, but I'm just really an energy. I'm really a vibration. But we're all in this together. Because here, there's no space, there's no time. We're all one universe. And we're all assisting you. There is so much help right now, but we can't help you if you don't ask, if you don't search, if you don't know. At this moment, if you're listening to this, you've asked for help in any way. You might have asked with your intention. You might have asked with your heart. You might have asked when you were crying in front of the TV, feeling despair. But that is why we're here. That is why we're here, to assist you in this time and to lift the veil of the fear and just pour in love. The problem is people around you, listeners, sometimes have a hard time letting love enter their bodies. And this is for everybody. It doesn't have to do with a political preference. It doesn't have to do with what your beliefs are, with what the way you think the world should be. It has to do with not being able to receive love and not feeling worthy of love. And that is what is at the core of everything. You're not open to receiving love. If you were all open to receiving love, just receiving love from wherever, without condition, without thinking, oh, love comes from that, this has to happen, or this has to happen. You wouldn't block it, and you would just allow it to come to your body. So feel how you move those blocks and just that stagnant energy, so that you might receive love at this time, because that is what we're here to do. That's what we're here to give you. Just unconditional love. And it feels so simple, right? Love. Such a simple word that you see every day. But in reality, The only thing keeping you from that is yourself. And love is the most powerful force. There's a reason why you hear it every day. So it might be common, but it's very, very, very powerful. So to everybody listening right now, I have tons of light beings around each and every one of you, downloading love into each one of your cells. Just breathe in and just let yourself be bathed with that beautiful, loving light from the Akashic Records coming down into all of your bodies, activating that. Know that this is available for you. It is always available for you. It doesn't have to do with Sofia speaking or you listening to this podcast. It is always available if you choose to open to it. If you say, hey, I want to feel love. You can call Jesus, you can call Mary, you can call whatever aliens you see, you can call on anybody, you can call on your grandmother. Just call on somebody that makes you feel good, that gives you that sense of peace. Even if you don't believe it, just open yourself up to it, because that is what we're trying to do. That is our main mission here on earth, is to open you up to receive love and light. And we wish you the best for the rest of the year. Next year is going to be amazing for all of you. We trust that if you open up to receiving our energy, it will be worth it. And we give you so much love and respect, and thank you. Thank you for finding the way back to yourself. This is why you're listening to this message. This is why you've been put in this position, because you are finding your way back to yourself, back to yourself, back to yourself, to your aligned truth within, whatever that may be. Everybody has different responsibilities. Everybody has different missions. Do not impose yourself on others. That blocks love. If you impose yourself on others, it creates stagnant energy in them, and they're not able to receive what they need to receive. Have you ever thought that maybe the other person needs to think differently? Open yourself up to that. Open yourself up to unconditional love and compassion for all beings. That is my message to you today. And for you, host of the Divine Nobodies Podcast, thank you. Thank you for doing this work. We appreciate your energy. Know that your podcast has a place in the universe where you can come play. We welcome you here. And if you choose to, I will be waiting for you. If you choose to visit me in the podcast. Okay. He's like moving away. He's giving me the peace sign. That's why I'm laughing. It's like such a stone Jesus. Like, what?
That's good old Jesus.
It's so funny. He's like so happy. He's like so high on life. Okay, so they're moving me back, and it's actually now like I crossed over a bridge or something when I went with him, and now I'm like it's a slide, like I'm going down a slide back. I can feel it. Okay, so yeah, they're closing it off. Okay. I was gonna see if we could ask any questions, but they're like, bye. I think that was the important message for the night. Okay, so let me just close the records. It is now time to disconnect from the Akashic Records frequency. I would like to thank everyone who communicated with us today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The records are now closed. The records are now closed. The records are now closed. Amen. So how was that? Did you feel the energy?
That was
beautiful.
awesome.
I was going to ask you to see if you can find out what kind of weed Jesus smokes.
Right? And I am totally
I
not
need
surprised.
some of that.
I am, first of all, that's hilarious that Jesus came. Second of all, of course, we would get the psychedelic stone Jesus.
Yeah, of course.
I was like wondering if I should mention that, because usually it like aligns with the energy of, probably
the people.
Yeah. So I'm like, do you guys smoke every time before you? I don't know.
No, what's funny is I was actually texting somebody the other day, and you know how you have the gifts, or you can search for gifts on your phone, and you actually search Jesus. Because Jesus somehow came into my family chat, and there was actually a gif of Jesus riding a dinosaur.
I swear, like this Jesus would have, yeah.
He's riding dinosaurs all day long.
Yeah.
So now we have to do that same thing, but you have to do it again in Spanish.
Could you imagine? So they always change the messages. I've tried doing that. And sometimes once I did it when this started for doctors. They were having a channeled message for doctors, and I did it in English and Spanish, and it was different. but the length was exactly the same, 944, which is like my number.
Oh,
So that
wow.
was like really, really cool. I was
That's
like,
cool.
okay. And I never know how much time goes by, really.
Yeah.
I don't know how much time went
Yeah.
by.
Oh,
I
that
don't
was
know how much
quick. It
time
was only
either.
like 14 minutes.
But that was really beautiful though.
Yeah,
Oh,
that was
it-
really
so
cool.
Did you feel the energy?
Yeah,
Yeah. You
absolutely.
can totally feel the energy in that.
That's the Akashic Records, guys.
Oh, that's so awesome.
I appreciate that. Thank you,
Yeah,
Sophia,
of
for
course.
doing that.
Yeah.
Of course. I hope,
Yeah.
because when I'm channeling, I'm like, is that enough? Like, should we ask more? Like, I want to be in there forever. But
Yeah.
they were like, nope, this is what they need to know. Sometimes they will kick me out. Like, they're like, okay, done. We're done. Go bye. Yeah.
Yeah.
They literally do that all the time.
I love that Jesus came in that way though,
Yeah.
because he's a fun guy. He likes to party.
Yeah.
He's so fun.
He
Oh,
likes to
well,
have
I
fun.
did this really old lady. So in my Spanish group, I don't think she knows English. So I have one, because I teach intuitive healing and Akashic Records, and I have this 3-month program. And we're like 15 people in my Spanish group. And then there's this lady who is like 80. And we're all like, 30, 40, and she's 80. And she's like the best. She's so funny. So she's sending me a lot of her friends, but they're all like, old ladies.
yeah.
So one of them's like very obsessed with Jesus, but she's like very religious, like her whole life. So I did an Akashic reading for her, and Jesus came through. But he was like, just join me here in the bonfire. And like, he's like, you see, I'm a cool guy. I like to have fun. I'm not judging you, because she had all these judgment. And one thing I feel like, wow, this woman is like 80 years old, and she's been living with her judgment her whole life. She's never done an Akashic reading until this point. And now, like, you could see like her whole life back and how judgment has, So that is why I'm like,
Go
so
back. Mhm.
I think it's so important to do this work when you're young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also she was saying that Jesus, she was like, oh yeah, I've seen him there, in the
Awesome.
Wow.
bonfire.
That's
So, yeah.
beautiful.
How about that?
Okay, so we appreciate that. For people that are interested in Sophie's work, she can be found on her website at
Inshallah.
InshallahDesign.com. She's also on social media. You can go to her Facebook at facebook.com/spiritual playground. And she also offers the teaching. So if you want to learn how to channel the Akashic Records, she's also a Reiki practitioner. And she also does the intuitive healer certification. And if you want to spice up your house, she does the spiritual interior design.
Yes. I
Thank
love
you.
that.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, it was really, really pleasure. You're welcome anytime.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes. We're going to have you back.
Yeah, we're going to
You're
have
really
you back.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about just everything.
Thank you so
Everybody
much.
that's listening, if you want to download our podcast, we're available on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, as well as Pandora is going to be coming up into the field. We're on our iHeartRadio as well, and also on YouTube. So if you want to see the video of this podcast, you can go onto YouTube, like and subscribe, do all the things, leave us a comment. And you can also go directly to our website at www.divine-nobodies.com. Also our Instagram, which is divine-nobodies-podcast. I think that's everything, right?
That's everything.
Yeah. Until next time, thank you so much again, Sophia,
Yes,
for coming
thank
in.
you.
Namaste, friends.
Namaste.